Good morning, Rachel. Thank you for joining us. As we are here at Money 2028, we just wanted to understand more on what is the whole APIX platform about and what does it do for startups in the region.
Well, thank you. So APIX is the platform that AFIN set up. AFIN is the ASEAN Financial Innovation Network. It was established by the Monetary Authority of Singapore and IFC and the ASEAN Bankers Association. We saw a real market failure between banks and fintechs not really pairing up, not meeting up. And we saw that it's taking between 8 months and 2 years for a bank and a fintech to actually start to make a commercial tie-up. So we set up AFIN and the APIX platform to first allow for testing and then for deploying. We call it discover, design, and deploy.
So especially when you come to the deploy part of it, so how do you navigate the fact that a bank would have its own procurement process, RFP, price discovery for different vendors, evaluating for cybersecurity, operation risk. So the procurement cycle is and the different banks will have different versions of it. So how do you, I would say, streamline it and standardize it into one template?
So what we have first is the marketplace, which is just information, and that's what you call easy. I would say that's the easy part. Then we have the sandbox, and the sandbox is actually when you can actually test and use, and we publish the APIs, and the bank and the fintech can, in the sandbox, really test how this works. And what we ask for from the banks is it's not just the IT team, not just the business, but we have risk there from the beginning. So the risk really understands what's happening. And then we are moving into deploy. We're just starting to do this, but deploying is about actually AFIN and APIX having a secured and enabling a secure deployment so that the chief risk officers really see that they can be kind of rest assured about cybersecurity when they're actually moving to deploy. And then we are enabling the two groups to deploy. Now right now, for deployment, they have to leave the APIX platform. But in the next version, we're going to actually have that deployment. And right now, our current sprint is actually on billing because we understand that commercialization is a big part.
And especially so would APIX be part of defining the price discovery, pricing model? Because that's very sensitive in terms of for a financial institution to get multiple quotes and doing the OPEX versus CAPEX calculation of these procurements. So will there be will procurement be also a function inside APIX?
No, so we're not there. And I don't think that we actually, as IFC, MAS, and the consortium have those skill sets, nor do we actually want to kind of engage and be the matchmaker of the commercial discussion. We are introducing and helping these two groups really understand what the value proposition for each other and actually deploy that. But when it comes to the commercial discussion, I think that that's best between those two groups. Of course, as AFIN, we are involved with curating and helping to move this forward. So the IFC and MAS team are, of course, advising and supporting AFIN to move forward and handling issues like this as it comes up. But we do not see that as our role to actually intervene in the commercial discussion between the two groups.
That's very interesting. So you would be enablers, but not the active participants.
We're evangelists, we're enablers, we're facilitators, but in the end, we're not the decision maker.
And who pays for it? So the startup pays to be on the platform, the banks pay, both pay. So how does the, who keeps the lights running?
So this is called the commercialization of APIX, and actually we are going to start announcing the actual commercialization and the pricing policy very soon. When we were just in Myanmar at a large event, we had about 150 people from banks and fintechs. In Myanmar, we started to price out how this would work, and so right now I can't say exactly what the pricing is, but that is coming very soon, and there's going to be a different scale for banks and a different scale for fintechs. What we just haven't decided is there a different scale for different asset sides of banks.
Fair enough. And do you see a role for service providers like consulting professional services, because they are a part of the whole procurement process or deployment process in terms of getting the risk certification, governance? So do you see, a startup and a financial institution is two parts, but the other parts of the equation, the legal service provider, professional service, risk service, do you see a services marketplace evolving as part of this in future?
Well, as you know, IFC also has its own advisory business, and I'm constantly asked, have we gotten any advisory mandates from this? But we're actually trying to keep them very separate. I mean, I see that there's a role for larger institutions to have those service providers, but some of the smaller banks and the fintechs, I'm not sure if they need that to actually for that. I mean, some of our banks in countries like Myanmar, in Pakistan, and Cambodia, it may be enough just to have the bank and the fintech sit down and figure out, because they saw the test and all parts of the bank and the fintech are involved in the test, they can make that decision without the service providers. But of course, if it's a larger bank, then that larger bank may want to have a larger player, or if it's a larger fintech, they may want to have
system integration partner or channel partners.
Exactly. So there are whole ways for different groups to participate in this, but we're not saying that that has to be that larger ecosystem. It can just be sometimes two, and it can be a larger group if it's actually a much larger deployment.
And in terms of any specific targets in terms of by this year FinTech Festival in November, what's the number you are aiming at in terms of financial institutions and startups?
Well, actually, we had initial numbers that we thought we were going to reach in 1 year or 2 years, but we've already reached all those numbers.
Wow.
So IFC's actually just increased all the targets that we want from this in terms of the banks and fintechs, but I'm sure that it's actually going to be quite not that challenging to reach those. So we're trying to actually put even stiffer targets in this, because we see a lot of interest from the banks and the fintechs. But what we've also learned is that it really takes the AFIN team going into each country and really helping to get the first parts on and doing a lot of hand-holding. So that's why 2 weeks ago we had the big 2-day event in Myanmar. Last week we were in Pakistan. We're going to Cambodia and Vietnam. So it takes, in the first year, it's going to be not just AFIN, but we really need all the different kind of players involved to do hand-holding. And then once it goes going, then you can see it really takes off. I mean, we have I think 650 separate users registered on AFIN already, which is way beyond what we thought we would have.
Wow, so that's a new realm, this is a new internet world of banking, so it's like an ecosystem for banks, financial institutions to build a new world.
But the one thing that we actually are now starting, and when I look at between now and the next FinTech Festival, it's really engaging more with the World Bank and the regulators, because we're still talking banks and fintechs, but when we designed this, there was also that the regulators would have a role as to learn, and we would be able to disseminating learnings to the regulators. And that piece we're now going to start doing along with the World Bank, who's very keen to partner with us on that.
And especially when it comes to things like cloud, digital KYC, that's something you will have to also figure out how to standardize and benchmark that all together.
Those two issues, as well
those
as
two are the first ones.
Those two are the first ones that people talk about, but also we have a lot of interest on supply chain finance as part of AFIN, and then the accounting treatment of supply chain finance, that comes up quite quickly. So there are a number of different issues. Our role is not to engage directly with the regulators, but actually to compile learnings and feedback to feed up into the ecosystem to the regulators.
Okay, wow. So we look forward to a great year ahead and see some really bigger announcements and bigger developments by FinTech Festival this year.
Yes.
Thank you, Rachel, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
This is Varun Mittal from Medici Studio.